So I'm going to provide a short presentation on elbow arthritis and stiffness and how that can be managed. David's going to provide some review with regard to proximal radial ulnar joint stiffness, and Ram's going to cover some of the elbow stiffness of the ulnar humeral joint. These are my conflicts of interest, which I don't think are relevant. So when we look at the stiff elbow, Maury taught us about the importance of classification between intra-articular and extra-articular. So the intra-articular includes those with osteoarthritis, loose bodies and synovitis. Extra-articular, heterotopic ossification. And I think all of us have developed and gone through that phase, but I don't think it's as simple as that. There's another important group in the middle, the capsular causes. And so if a patient has a radial head fracture, which is minimally displaced, we put them in a plaster for, say, a month, that patient will get a stiff elbow. They're getting the stiff elbow not so much from the radial head fracture, but from the associated capsular changes. And the reason why this is important is because that patient may just need a capsular release of the elbow. So it defines the etiology, but it also helps determine the type of treatment that's used for the individual case. In our preoperative assessment, we may use imaging, so plain x-rays I think for everybody. CT scans I think are particularly useful for degenerative osteoarthritis and also fractures. The MRI for some of the soft tissue aspects to try and get a better understanding of the pathology. When we look at the CT scans, we can see on the top left how we've got osteophytes that are impinging. We can see the associated fracture, heterotopic ossification. But one of the areas we've been actively involved is the 4D CT scan. And I think it gives us a different understanding of how the osseous tissues impinge. And of course, it's also important for instability. So 4D CT scan being a dynamic instrument gives us a better understanding of the dynamic components of the stiffness. When we look at these other images here, we can see on the left the concept of a trash elbow. This is a very important concept. The adolescent who has quite a swollen elbow, you think the x-rays aren't too bad, and they may have an osteochondral fracture, top right radial ulnar synostosis and synovial chondromatosis. It's an uncommon condition in the elbow, but it's an important one which can be associated with the development of degenerative osteoarthritis. I just want to warn you about with synovial chondromatosis, I have personally never seen a malignancy, and I have not ever been to one of these meetings and seen a case presented. However, in the historic literature, synovial chondromatosis is thought to be a precursor of chondrosarcoma. And if we recently looked it up, and if you look up GTP, you might find that there's an association. So my recommendation is that those patients that you think have synovial chondromatosis, you should just at least be thinking, could it be something else, including a chondrosarcoma? I have never seen that. Going on to the stiff elbow, some of the soft tissues. This image on the left, I think, beautifully demonstrates how the thickening of the capsule and the orientation of those folds from inferior to superior, you can see how that they may contract and be associated with the contracture of the elbow. The patient who has a thickening and scarring of the posterior bundle of the MCL may lose some flexion. And then the quadrate ligament between the radius and the ulnar, if that gets contracted, they will lose supination. One of the most important things we'll discuss today is the relevance of the ulnar nerve with associated elbow stiffness. It is not uncommon for a patient to present with pain, particularly over the medial aspect of the elbow. They may have had other surgery, they may have had a dislocation, and this can be a delayed presentation, so they will present at 2 months or 3 months, and you think they're doing okay, and they start to go backwards. There's a good chance this patient has heterotopic ossification around the ulnar nerve. This needs to be assessed and released. The other example that I've seen in my practice quite a few times over the years is after doing complex shoulder surgery, such as a shoulder replacement, they're in a sling for a few weeks, and then they'll start to get numbness, and this can be quite disabling. So these patients need to be assessed, and I think they need a surgical release. And the third group I want to put in there is the patient who's had, say, a hip replacement or had a coronary artery bypass graft, and they're lying on the bed and they've got pressure there. The prognosis of those patients with ulnar nerve impingement, iatrogenic, is actually very poor, much poorer than you would naturally think, and these patients also need a reasonably urgent release. So these three groups are important. So at the time of thinking about doing arthroscopy, it's important to be able to palpate the ulnar nerve and see if it's unstable. If it is unstable, you can bring it back behind the epicondyle. Or really, if you're not sure, if you really don't know where it is, then to do an open approach, you'll never be criticised for that. Identify the nerve, make sure it's safe, and then perform the arthroscopy. But the important thing is every case you do have arthroscopy, you should identify the nerve. When we're doing arthroscopy, I use what I call the 2 centimetre rule. That is basically that all the working portals around the elbow are 2 centimetres proximal to the bony landmark. So 2 centimetres proximal to the medial epicondyle, lateral epicondyle, and the olecranon. These are the standard working portals. We use the concept that we described initially in the wrist, in the elbow as well, is the box. So the box concept is basically use multiple portals and make sure that you have the best panoramic view of the pathology, and then from another direction you're bringing the working instrument in the best line to be able to debride or resect or whatever's required when managing this case. So when we're doing these patients with degenerative osteoarthritis, I use what I call a prescription for surgery, or basically create a game plan. And the idea is to do the bony work first, identify where the osteophytes are, and then the soft tissue. So in this case, identified osteophytes in the coronoid process and radial fossa, and these need to be debrided or resected. And then we need to think about the soft tissues, and particularly where areas such as the radial nerve may be at risk. We tend to use dry arthroscopy. Dry arthroscopy is commonly used in the wrist, and dry arthroscopy gives you a different perspective. As you're looking around the articulation of the elbow, you can see the perfusion, you can see the folds of synovium, and you get a better depth of field. And one of the reasons for that is you get a reflection of the air fluid interface, and so therefore you get a better depth of field. If you have Ceylon in there, you do not have that reflection. We naturally use these reflective surfaces in how we assess the three-dimensional shape of objects. The next thing is, I noticed very early in my career that a common problem that I had, and I still sometimes do it, is to be too close. And you'll find this with your own fellows and your own, even some of the junior consultants, they will tend to be in too close. You want to try and get that panoramic view. It's important to understand what's going on. So basically with a dry scope, it's almost like having a torch looking inside the joint, and you can see all the reflections around the articulation, and you can see them more clearly. So it's not with distension, it's not with a pump. We're not going to get an air embolus, but we do that because we can get a better understanding. And we would often use retractors because we don't have the distension. We use retractors to help retract the soft tissues out of the way, as seen here. There are some groups that are starting to use carbon dioxide in the same way as you would do with laparoscopy, and that may be something that you can look at in your practice. So we would tend to do a debridement arthroscopically. You can see the retractor on your left, and then as soon as the loose bodies come into view, I recommend you just take them out then, because later on you might struggle to find them. And you can see these osteophytes over the radial fossa. The osteophytes are soft and easy to resect. They're not hard like we were often taught. So these can be resected. We can put the fluid in to wash it out, and you can see here now the fluid's inside the joint. You put the suction back on, and then we can see again. So the use of the dry arthroscopy, I think, is quite important. It enables us to get a better understanding of the functional anatomy, obviously less swelling, and it extends the surgical time, but there is a learning curve, and those who are experienced will find it uncomfortable. The junior guys actually manage it better. So going on to the coronoid process, if there's significant osteophytes, I'll often put an osteotome in the lateral portal, and under direct arthroscopic vision, excise the osteophyte and take it out with a pituitary rongeur or some sort of grasper. So going on to the capsulectomy, so a lot of people would recommend a linear capsulectomy, and I think that's quite reasonable. You can do that with a shaver or basket forceps, or you can do a total resection of the capsule, which then takes into risk the radial nerve. So I actually think the best option is a subtotal capsulectomy, which means that you're not taking away the at-risk area over the anterior aspect of the radial head. So we can see here a capsular release using bipolar cautery, but you can use basket forceps. And for the very experienced surgeon, you can actually identify the radial nerve on the anterior aspect. This cadaveric specimen beautifully shows the radial nerve and PIN passing over the anterior aspect of the capsule, the radial head and capitellum. That's exactly where it is, and it's an important surgical landmark if you're going to avoid those complications. This is the same cadaveric specimen, and you can see as we pass around through the window, we can actually see the radial nerve sitting anterior to the capitellum. So median nerve, there's discussion about the median nerve, but the median nerve is pretty safe. You've got the biceps being dragged out of the way, then you've got brachialis and the neurovascular bundle, median nerve and brachial artery, completely protected by the full thickness of brachialis. So when we're doing arthroscopy, tips near nerves, use free drainage so it can drain away. Always have the shaver away from the nerves. Preferably don't use the teeth in the shavers. Bipolar cautery can be useful. Use retractors. And if you're really not sure, just bail out and only cut what you want to cut. So in summary, I think the ulnar nerve is a very important aspect. We need to understand and respect the soft tissues and the osseous aspects around the elbow and use some of these techniques to be able to safely and reliably resect the management of the stiff elbow. And for those who are interested, this is under the ISACOS banner. There are 3 books I've been involved with. The one on the very left is a major textbook on the elbow of over 800 pages. The one on the right has just come out a few weeks ago, and it's specifically dedicated to the stiff elbow for those who are interested. The Global Elbow Network is a new group that's formed. It's a great group. There's almost 500 members in less than a year, and we'll be having our first meeting in November, 6 to 8. That's something I recommend you get involved with. And Global Connect is an interactive thing like WhatsApp that enables you to discuss cases. And the ICAD group, being very progressive, we've been running elbow arthroscopy courses in Taiwan. But just even earlier this week, we ran some cadaveric courses here in India at the Indian ICAD Centre. I think it's something that you'll enjoy. Thank you very much.